You know that feeling when your gut tells you something is wrong, but your brain keeps making excuses, because the alternative is too ugly to accept. I lived in that gap for almost 4 months, before everything collapsed at once. My sister and I were never the kind of siblings who called each other every week, or texted memes back and forth. We were close in the way families tell themselves they're close. Holidays, birthdays, the occasional Sunday dinner at my parents' house in Naperville. She's 3 years younger than me. Always the one my parents has described as free-spirited, which was their polite way of saying she never held a job for more than 8 months. Borrowed money she forgot to pay back, and somehow always landed on her feet because someone, usually my parents, occasionally me, was there to catch her. I don't say that with bitterness anymore, I used to. But by the time I'm telling you this story, I've had enough distance to see it clearly. My name is not important. What's important is that I'm 32 years old. I work in supply chain management for a mid-size logistics company out of Chicago. And for 5 years I was engaged to the woman I thought I'd spend my life with. I'll call her Leah, because that's her name and I'm done protecting it. I met Leah at a co-worker's birthday thing in Wicker Park. One of those gatherings where you don't know half the people, and end up talking to a stranger for 2 hours, because the alternative is standing near the chip bowl, pretending to check your phone. She was funny in a dry, quiet way, didn't try to impress anyone, ordered the cheapest beer on the menu and didn't make a production out of it. I asked for her number before I even knew her last name. We dated for 3 years before I proposed. We were saving for a house in the western suburbs, not because either of us was particularly attached to Naperville or wherever, but because it made financial sense. Leah was a dental hygienist with a stable schedule and benefits. I was pulling in decent money, and had finally cleared my student loans. We had a joint savings account with $82,000 in it. We had a future laid out like a blueprint. What I didn't have was any reason to suspect that my sister had been sleeping with my fiancé for the better part of a year. Let me back up. My sister. I'll call her Mara. Because again, done protecting people, had been going through what my mother described as a hard stretch. She'd lost her apartment lease in Logan Square when her roommate moved to Portland, and she couldn't cover rent solo. She'd quit her job at a marketing agency after what she called a toxic environment, and what her former coworker, who happened to be a mutual friend, described as she stopped showing up. My parents offered her the guest room in Naperville. She said she needed her independence, so they asked me if she could stay with me for just a few months, while she got back on her feet. I had a 2-bedroom in Lincoln Park. Leah didn't officially live with me, but she was there 4 or 5 nights a week. We were comfortable. The second bedroom was basically a home office. I said yes, because that's what you do for family. Mara moved in on a Saturday in February, with 3 suitcases, and a portable speaker and a bottle of wine she said was a housewarming gift, which she then opened and drank most of herself that evening. I didn't mind, I was happy to help. She was my little sister. The first few weeks were fine. She was looking for work, she said. She made coffee in the mornings, kept her dishes clean, went to bed at a reasonable hour. Leah and Mara got along. They'd always been friendly in that surface-level way, where 2 people have the same person in common, and find enough to talk about. They'd go to yoga occasionally. They watched reality TV together on my couch while I answered emails. I want to be honest with you. There was never a single moment that felt obviously wrong. No text I accidentally saw, no lipstick on a collar. Nothing cinematic. What there was, looking back, was a slow shift in energy that I kept explaining away, because the truth would have required me to blow up my entire life, and I wasn't ready to do that. Leah started staying over less. She said she was tired, that work had been stressful, that she needed her own space sometimes. I said I understood, because I did understand, because I trusted her completely. Mara started going out more, coming home later, being vague about where she'd been. I assumed she was rebuilding her social life. I was glad she seemed happier. The thing that finally cracked it open wasn't dramatic at all. I came home early on a Tuesday in October, because a supplier meeting got canceled, and I didn't feel like sitting in the office until 5. It was around 2 in the afternoon. I remember there was a cold front moving in, the kind of October day in Chicago, where the sky turns a specific shade of gray that makes everything feel slightly unreal. My key was in the lock, and I could hear music inside. Mara's portable speaker. I thought she was home alone, working on her resume or watching something. I pushed the door open, set my bag down, walked to the kitchen to get a glass of water, and then I heard Leah's voice. Not her voice saying something. Just her voice, the sound of it. From behind the closed door of my second bedroom, I stood in the kitchen for probably 30 seconds not moving. I want to tell you I stormed down the hall and confronted them. The truth is I just stood there, glass in my hand, listening to the sound of my own life rearranging itself. And then I walked down the hall. And I opened the door. I'm not going to describe what I saw in detail because it's not the point, and because some images you'd rather not put words to. What I will tell you is that the moment I opened that door, Both of them went completely still. Like time froze. And then Leah said my name. Just my name. Nothing after it. I closed the door. I went back to the kitchen. I put the glass down very carefully on the counter because I was afraid of what I might do if I had something in my hand. And I stood there staring at the backsplash tile until I heard movement behind me, and then Mara's voice saying, "We need to talk." I turned around. She was standing in the kitchen doorway, pulling her hair back, using that tone she's always used when she knows she's wrong, but wants to be the one controlling the conversation. Leah was behind her in the hallway, arms crossed. I said, "Get out of my apartment." Mara started explaining. She said it had only been a few weeks. Which was the first lie. She said it wasn't planned. Which may have been true but was completely irrelevant. She said Leah and I had been drifting. Which was her framing our relationship's deterioration as something that had simply happened to us, rather than something she and Leah had been actively causing. I said, "Get out of my apartment again." Leah tried. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't know how it happened. She said that phrase people say when they want absolution without accountability. "I never meant to hurt you." I said, "You have 10 minutes. Take what you need for tonight. The rest we'll figure out later." They left. I sat on the kitchen floor for a while. I'm not embarrassed about that. I sat on the floor with my back against the cabinets, and I looked at my hands, and I thought about the $82,000 in that joint savings account, and our lease on a storage unit in Bridgeport, and the venue deposit we'd put down in March for a wedding the following September, and I thought, this is the part of the story nobody tells you about. Not the moment you catch them. Not even the conversation. The sitting with it after part. When there's nothing to do and no one to call, and the apartment is quieter than it's ever been. I called my mother that evening. In hindsight. And this hindsight has cost me a lot. I called her because she was my mother, and because I was in shock, and because I genuinely believed that when she found out what her daughter had done, she would be on my side. My mother was quiet for a long time after I told her. Then she said, "I can't imagine how you're feeling right now." That was the right thing to say. That was the correct, appropriate response to what I had just told her. Then she said, "But I want you to think carefully before you do anything. Mara has been struggling." There it was. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said, "She was living in my house." My mother said she knew that. She said she wasn't defending Mara, and she used those exact words. "I'm not defending her." Right before she started defending her, she said Mara had been in a dark place emotionally. She said Leah and I had been having problems anyway, hadn't we? She said these things happen in families and that what mattered now was that we didn't do anything irreparable. I said, "Mom, she slept with my fiancée in my apartment while living rent-free under my roof." My mother said, "I know, sweetheart, but she's still your sister." That was the last thing she said that night. That I remember clearly. Because after that I stopped really listening. I said goodnight, and I hung up. And I sat with what I now understood to be the actual situation. My family was going to handle this the way they always handled Mara's disasters. With grace and patience and a complete reorientation of reality, so that she remained, as she had always been, the one they couldn't afford to lose. I called my father the next morning. My father has always been the quieter one, the more measured one, the one I expected to be reasonable. He said, "Son, your mother and I talked," which told me everything. Then he said, "Mara is really broken up about this," which told me more. Then he said he hoped I wouldn't make any rash decisions. I said, "What kind of decision would be appropriate in your opinion?" He didn't really have an answer for that. I want to tell you that over the next few weeks, I gave my family every opportunity to say the right thing. I did. I'm not someone who burns bridges without warning. I had individual conversations with my mother, my father, and my aunt, my dad's sister, who I've always been close to, and who I thought might see things clearly. My aunt told me that Mara had reached out to her and was devastated, and didn't know how it happened. My aunt said she felt terrible for me, and then she said she hoped I could find it in my heart to eventually forgive my sister. There was a pattern in all of these conversations. Everyone felt terrible for me. No one was siding with Mara, technically speaking, but the subtext in every single one of these conversations was the same. Don't let this break the family. Don't make us choose. Don't be the one who makes this permanent. The thing about being the stable one, the reliable one, the one who always showed up and paid his bills and didn't ask for anything, is that your family comes to see your stability as infinite. It doesn't occur to them that you have a limit. That one day you might simply stop. I stopped. I started quietly. No announcement, no confrontation with Mara, no dramatic final conversation. I transferred my half of the joint savings account to my personal account. Consulted a lawyer about the venue deposit and the lease arrangements. And found a real estate attorney to help me understand my options. On the condo we'd been planning to buy together, I gave notice on the Lincoln Park apartment. I'd been the primary leaseholder, and I found a sublet in Andersonville while I figured out my next move. At work, I'd been in conversation for several months about an opportunity with a partner company in Minneapolis. I'd been on the fence. I wasn't on the fence anymore. I didn't tell my parents I was leaving Chicago. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I finished the sublet period, accepted the Minneapolis offer, loaded my car and a rented trailer, and left on a Thursday morning in January. Chicago in January is not a city that begs you to stay. The sky was white, and the wind was coming off the lake, and I got on I-90 North, and I didn't look back once. I changed my phone number. I know that seems extreme to people who haven't been in a situation like this, but it wasn't extreme. It was clarifying. There is a kind of peace that comes from removing yourself from the reach of people who keep asking you to be okay with something you're not okay with. My new number went to my coworkers, my friends from college, a handful of people who had nothing to do with any of this. That was it. For 3 months, I heard nothing. I won't pretend that felt good at first. It's a strange thing to choose silence and then have to sit inside it. Minneapolis was cold and unfamiliar. And I didn't know anyone there. And some nights I'd make dinner and eat it, standing at the kitchen counter, looking out at the streetlights and feel the specific loneliness of someone who has done the right thing and has no one to celebrate it with. But the loneliness was clean. It didn't have the weight of other people's expectations in it. It didn't require me to manage anyone's feelings about my own wound. It was just quiet. And eventually the quiet started to feel like something I had chosen rather than something that had been done to me. In March, I got an email from my father. He'd found my new work email. I still had the same LinkedIn, which I've since updated, and he wrote to tell me that the family was having Easter together, and that my absence the previous year had been hard on everyone. He said my mother missed me. He said Mara wanted the chance to apologize in person. I read it twice. Then I saved it to a folder and didn't respond. A week later, another email. This one more urgent. My mother's handwriting in the subject line, in the sense that he'd clearly transcribed what she'd said to him. Please just call us. We love you and we are worried. I saved that one too. What I was noticing, what I want you to notice, is what these messages were not. They were not, you were right to be devastated. They were not, we handled this wrong and we're sorry. They were not even, we should have been on your side. They were consistently about the discomfort of my absence. About what my leaving had cost them, not about what their response had cost me. That's the thing about people who want you to reconcile without acknowledging what they did. Reconciliation to them means you agree to forget. Not that they agree to reckon with it. I did not forget, and I did not reconcile. The next significant thing happened in August, 14 months after I'd left Chicago. My aunt, the one I'd always been close to, reached out through a mutual cousin to let me know that she'd be in Minneapolis for a conference, and could we get coffee? I said yes, because I still had genuine affection for her, and because I was curious. We met at a place near my apartment on a Saturday morning. She hugged me for a long time. She said I looked good, which I think was true. Minneapolis had been good for me in ways I hadn't expected. I'd joined a running club. I'd gotten into cooking seriously. I was dating someone. Casually, carefully, not ready to trust my own judgment yet but beginning to. My aunt asked how I was and I told her honestly. Then she said, I need to tell you something about Mara. Mara and Leah had broken up. 4 months after I left Chicago apparently. My aunt didn't know all the details, but the gist was that the relationship, once it was out in the open and legal and official, hadn't been what either of them had imagined it would be. Mara had moved back into my parents' house. Leah had relocated. My aunt wasn't sure where. I want to be honest with you about how I received this information. I had spent a lot of time, in the months before this conversation, examining my own feelings about karma and justice, and what I was actually hoping for. And what I found, if I'm being truthful, was that I wasn't hoping for Mara to suffer. I wasn't hoping for Leah to be unhappy. What I had been hoping for, what I had needed in some quiet unspoken way, was simply for it to have been real. For them to have actually loved each other. Because if they'd blown up my life for something that lasted 4 months, that was a different and uglier thing. That was a different and uglier thing, and it meant the people I loved had been capable of casualness about my pain, that I found very hard to sit with. My aunt waited for me to say something. I said okay. She said, I think Mara understands now, in a way she didn't before, what she actually did. I said that's between her and herself. My aunt looked at me carefully. She said, you know your mother has had some health issues. I said I didn't know that. She said nothing serious, but that my mother had been dealing with some anxiety. And the stress of the family situation had been hard on her. And there it was again. The soft deployment of guilt. My mother's anxiety as a reason I should reconsider my choices. I noticed it and I didn't react to it, which is its own kind of growth, I think. I said, I hope she takes care of herself. My aunt said, is there any possibility of, I don't know what the word is. Not reconciliation. Just contact. I thought about it genuinely. I sat there with my coffee and I thought about it. What would contact look like? A phone call where my mother told me, She missed me and my father said he hoped I wasn't being too hard on Mara. And the whole careful architecture of avoiding accountability stayed perfectly in place, while I nodded along. A holiday dinner where Mara sat across from me and we both pretended, I said. I think contact right now would require me to act like things are different than they are, and they're not. My aunt didn't push. She nodded, and we talked about other things for another hour and then she left. And I walked home along the river and I felt something I hadn't fully expected to feel. Steady. Not happy exactly. Not vindicated. Just steady. Like a person who knows where he stands. The last contact I've had with my family came about 4 months ago. My father called my new number. I can only assume he got it from the cousin, who'd arranged the coffee with my aunt, which I've since addressed with that cousin directly. I almost didn't answer. I answered because he's my father and I'm 32. Not 12. And because I wanted to see what he would say. He said he was calling because he wanted me to know he was sorry. He said those words. He said, "I'm sorry," for how we handled it. He said he thought they'd been trying to protect the family and hadn't understood, until I disappeared, that I was also part of the family. That protecting the family should have included protecting me. It was the closest thing to the right thing that anyone in my family had said in the 18 months since that Tuesday in October. I said, "I appreciate that," he said. "Is there a way back?" I sat with that for a moment. A way back to what, exactly? Back to Sunday dinners in Naperville, with Mara passing the bread rolls, and my mother pretending everything was fine? Back to being the reliable one, the stable one, the one who could be counted on to absorb whatever damage the family produced. That version of me was gone. Not because I had destroyed him out of anger, but because he had needed to go. He was a person who had given everything, and asked for nothing and been rewarded for that with the assumption that nothing was exactly what he needed. I said, "I don't know what that looks like right now, Dad. I'm not closing the door permanently. But I'm not opening it just because enough time has passed." He said he understood. Whether he actually did, I couldn't say. We said goodbye. I haven't heard from anyone in my family since. I want to say something about what people get wrong about situations like mine. When you tell someone you've cut off your family, there's an assumption. Especially in American culture, where family is treated as this sacred untouchable thing. That, off is the statement. That it's the action. That you did something when you walked away. But walking away isn't the action. The action is everything that happened before it. The action is the choosing. The action is the moment your fiancé and your sister looked at each other and decided that what they wanted was worth more than what they owed you. The action is every family member who responded to that by asking you to be patient and understanding, and to consider how hard this was for everyone involved. I didn't cut my family off to punish them. I cut them off because every conversation I had with them required me to negotiate down my own reality, to accept a version of events in which I was the difficult one for not getting over it fast enough, and I decided I was done negotiating. Minneapolis is good now. The job is good. I've been promoted twice since I moved here. I have friends, a routine, a city that I've slowly made mine. I'm still seeing the woman I mentioned, and it's become something real and careful and built on a foundation of honesty that I now understand. Should have demanded from the beginning. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about Mara or Leah. Some days I do. Some mornings I wake up and, for a second, I'm back in that kitchen, glass in my hand, tile backsplash, October light, and I feel the whole thing again fresh. And then I get up and make coffee, and go to work, and come home, and cook dinner, and call the woman I'm seeing. And the day does what days do. The door isn't permanently closed. I said that to my father and I meant it. But it isn't open either. It's simply a door. It exists. And for right now, I'm on my side of it, and that's enough. I read once that the opposite of betrayal isn't revenge. It's the building of a life that couldn't have existed in the shadow of the people who betrayed you. I don't know who said that. But it's the truest thing I know right now. That's what I'm building.
Am I?
And I'm not done yet.